I'm Eva. I would like to welcome you to another episode of The Charm of It, my podcast for knitters who share my fascination with the nitty-gritty details of our craft. This is Thistle and this is Moth, and apparently the entire menagerie is going to hang out today. Well, Nutmeg, my corn snake, is in her tank, but I do plan to show her off on the podcast soon. It'll be at the end in case you are not fond of snakes. Anyway, this is going to be an episode with lots of different segments. Finished objects, yarn review, answering your questions, and the topic this week, I'm going to talk about winding yarn. So, nice and concrete after the last episode's very spacey discussion of wardrobe building. So let's go ahead and jump to finished objects. I am wearing one of them. This is why I always do finished objects before works in progress. Well, when I did them both in the same episode, because I can never resist wearing a finished object. I'm not sure how much of it you can see with my lovely pets blocking the view. But this is my herbarium vest, and it's knit out of Alice Starmore Hebridean 2-ply yarn. It's got 10 colors in it. I'm pretty sure I counted on the project page. And I designed it myself. I did use some of the numbers from Ann Budd's basic vest pattern from her handy book of patterns, Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns. You can see all the details for that stuff on my project page. And I talked about it in a lot of detail on last week's episode, which was a project snapshot, but I did have some more finished object type stuff that I wanted to discuss today. First of all, I was very nervous the whole time I was knitting it that a vest wouldn't fit into my wardrobe because I've thrifted a few waistcoat style vests in the past. You know, they look like they belong in a suit and they've got buttons down the front, and I really struggled with wearing them. I felt like they took my already quirky style a little too far over. So I was very nervous about that, but honestly, I've never had a pullover style vest before, and I have found this really, really easy to style. I'm really enjoying it. I like how I still have my arms free, you know, for maximum movement and for kind of transitional weather where I don't necessarily need all wool, but it's nice to keep my core warm, and I really love how it lets me add an extra layer. And so I think I know I'm going to be knitting more vests in the future. I want to do a worsted weight garter stitch vest. I think that would be really fun. Anyway, so yes, I've not had a problem fitting this into my wardrobe and my style. So that's very exciting. Let's see, I also wanted to say that it took about 600 yards or 140 grams, I believe, which is a little less than 6 skeins of yarn for the project, and that includes my swatching, because I went ahead and just weighed the leftover balls for what they were. So I was really pleasantly surprised at how little yarn it took, and since I managed to distribute that among so many colors, I did not have any problems with running out of yarn, and at no point did I feel like I was playing yarn chicken, which when I started the vest, the reason why I chose a vest rather than something with sleeves is because I only had one 25-gram ball of most of the colors. So I wasn't really sure what would happen. So yeah, pretty pleasant on that front. And let's see, I know I had more. Oh, I wanted to talk about the measurements. If you saw last week's episode, you saw that I talked about how I blocked it out to different measurements, and this yarn really loves to be blocked. It'll do pretty much whatever you ask of it. So even though I knit the body just in a 28-inch tube all the way up to the armhole shaping and stuff, so I didn't do any waist or bust shaping. Once I blocked it to 16 inches at the widest point right under the arms. And then I went down to 12 inches right above the waist ribbing so that it would resemble my actual torso a little more. And that worked really well. And I just measured it today before I put it on because I wore it another time too to see how well it matched that blocking. And as of today, the bust is 15.5 inches, so it stayed pretty close, and the waist is 13 inches now instead of 12 inches. So, you know, they want to go back to their original measurement. Oh, sorry, that's flat, obviously, all those measurements. So when I knit it, it was 14 inches across flat, basically. So as you see it being worn right now, I measured myself with my t-shirt on before I put the vest on too to get maximum accuracy. As you see it being worn right now, it has 2.25 inches of negative ease in the bust and about half an inch of positive ease in the waist. And I went ahead and took my finished object photos right before I recorded this, so if you want to look at my project page, you'll be able to see how that looks full shot, since the pets apparently don't think I should really show off my vest today. And then it was, in case you're interested, 17 inches long, and 7 inches of that is the arm side. And then 10 inches is from the armhole, and that includes the ribbing down to my waist. I have a very long torso, so that's the smallest part of my waist. And then the shoulder strap, including the ribbing, is 3.5 inches wide, and I definitely wouldn't want it any wider than that. I changed Ann Budd's vest pattern calls for thicker straps, but I knew that I wanted to do ribbing, and I didn't want the ribbing to be sitting out over my shoulder, so I did change that from the pattern. And I believe that that is pretty much, oh, the swatching took about 80 yards, by the way, of that total. This is all on my project page, but just in case you need a rough idea of yardage used, I will include all the measurements on my project page too. So yeah, I'm incredibly happy with the finished object. I still don't know if Alice Starmore yarn is next to the Skin Soft for me because I keep forgetting to try the vest on without anything underneath. And my neck and shoulders get sore easily, so once it's on and then I suddenly remember, I don't want to take everything off. And anyway, but I will definitely mention that when I finally do remember to try it without anything separating it. But as a vest, I'm perfectly comfortable with it. And, in the back of the neck, it's not itching me at all. So I will say that this yarn is not very good at ribbing. Like, it's not very good at drawing back in. So I've worn this vest. This is the second time I've worn it. And when I take it off right now, the waist ribbing doesn't draw in at all. It stays stretched out. So I knit the waist ribbing when I blocked it, and when you block ribbing, you kind of pull it down vertically so that it's squished up as much as possible so you're not stretching it at all. So when I measured it that way, it was 10 inches across. Moth, please don't put your claws in my new vest. Thank you. It was 10 inches across, which means 20 inches around, so that's about 4 inches of negative ease, which sounds like a lot, but when I measured it today, it was at 12.5 inches across, which is 25 inches, which is actually an inch of positive ease from my waist. Well, half an inch to an inch. My waist fluctuates. I'm sure most women's do. Anyway, so yeah, so it gained 5 inches just from being worn and not bouncing back. And luckily, since I knit it with so much negative ease to begin with, that's not a problem. It still comes in the way I wanted it to look good over full skirts and wide leg trousers. And that is, I knit the ribbing flat and seamed it up the side to give it a little more structure there. I found that a lot of woolen spun yarns, especially loosely plied ones, do stretch out more than the worsted spun yarn that I've used, so that's just something to consider. And I will keep it in mind for future projects. But this obviously hasn't stretched out at all, or the corrugated ribbing, probably because it's got stranded color work behind it. And I would definitely use Alice Starmore's yarn again. I think it just leads for such a beautiful, unusual looking finished object, more like a painting than knitwear. I just realized that in my introduction, I was so amused by the pets' antics that I forgot to welcome you all. So here's a belated welcome. If you're a returning viewer, it's so nice to see you again. And if you're a new viewer, welcome. Thank you for trying me out. I do different formats every other week. So depending on how many details you enjoy, you might also enjoy my progress snapshot videos, which are entirely focused on works in progress. Okay, my next finished object I'm completely in love with. It is the first of my Christmas projects, and it's Faux Thistle! Oh my gosh, I'm so happy with how she turned out. Oh, she's so cute. I can't stand it. I'm sorry, Thistle. Real Thistle is feeling a little bit envious. But as you can see, she is life-sized. Her head is actually bigger than Real Thistle's, and so are her paws, because Real Thistle has delicate paws. But when they sit side by side, they're the same size. And this is for my niece for Christmas. It's a surprise gift. That's why the photo of her is not in the thumbnail for the video, because my niece watches YouTubers, not me, but she watches other YouTubers, and I know that she's seen the thumbnails of my videos. So I want to try to keep it a surprise as much as possible. Excuse me. And I used a pattern for this. It's the Westy Puppy pattern, I believe. It's on my project page. And it's by a designer whose first name is Lorraine and whose last name I can't remember. I'm so bad with names. That's why I almost never do the designer names. But I'm mentioning her because I heard about her when she did an interview on the Fruity Knitting podcast. And she has lots of absolutely adorable softies if you too need to knit a Christmas gift. And her pattern was incredible because it was so detailed. So the face is really all important when you're making a softie. And her pattern told me exactly how far apart to do the eyes and the nose and the ears. It told me what circumference to stuff the muzzle to versus the head, and she did something really clever to get this head shaping. Told me what circumference to stuff the body and all the legs to. Oh, she's got a tail. And the only place where it wasn't super precise was sewing on the legs. So if you're a complete beginner to softies, that's the only place where you're going to have to do any kind of guesswork. Whereas with other patterns, they leave a lot more up to you to figure out. So yeah, and she did the length of the legs, the circumference of the paws, everything. So I would definitely recommend her patterns. This is the only one I've used, but I'm sure the other patterns are just as detailed. There were photo tutorials of some of the trickier parts so that you knew how to do assembly, and there were a few tips for working with the yarn, which is Lion Brand Fun Fur in the Sterling colorway, and it's an eyelash faux fur type of yarn. It's 100% polyester. I got it on a D-stash. And this took 5 skeins, which is less than the pattern called for, and I got 8 skeins on D-stash, so that means I've got 3 skeins to do something else with, and we will see what happens there. But yeah, I cannot even tell you how much I love Faux Thistle. So here she is. Close up. Oh, look at her. Oh, focus. Hopefully we're focused. I don't know. Yeah, she is super huggable and lovable. The only modification I made was the ears because, of course, Thistle has very special ears, and Faux Thistle had to have those ears too. The pattern has 2 upright ears, and they're smaller than this. I will say, so first I decided to knit an ear just like the pattern. And the pattern calls for you to knit the outside in the Fun Fur and then the inside in pink. And I had assumed, looking at the photos, that I would have to seam these 2 triangles together, but you don't. It's like magic. I don't know. She's very good with her increases and decreases. And so since I had no idea how the ear was going to come together, I knit one plain first just to see if it would work. And I used this variegated pink yarn that I have left over. And the result was not what I was expecting. The variegation just happened to pool in a way, and especially with the gray Fun Fur yarn, because the pattern uses white Fun Fur yarn, that it made it look like a part of the anatomy that is not an ear. I will insert the photo here. I texted a photo of it to my mom and one of my good friends to see if I just have a dirty mind or if they saw it too. And they definitely saw it too. So I'll insert a photo just for your own amusement. Okay, so hopefully now you've seen why that clearly was not going to work. Obviously my niece is 10, like she wasn't going to see anything wrong with it, but all the adults would have been smirking, and we don't need to smirk at faux thistle. So I ripped that one back, and I tried re-knitting it with an all one color paler pink yarn, and that looked a lot more like an ear, and a less, like it needed to be rated X. However, Thistle's ears, real Thistle's ears, aren't pink inside, really. They're gray because she's got lots of fur. See? Oh, demonstrate your ears, puppy. She's so tolerant. See? So it's just lighter gray on the inside. And I really wanted to make faux Thistle as close to real Thistle as possible. Oh, I know, puppy. So I ended up pulling out some Malabrigo worsted weight yarn that I have left over from one of the very first projects that I ever knit, a hat, and I can't remember the colorway, but it turned out, I think it looks really good. So the first modification I made was the colors, and as you can see I did the flappy ear in the same gray. And then the next modification I had to make was to the size, because the regular pattern calls for regular sized ears, and Thistle's got epic ears, so faux Thistle needed those too. And I actually made them 2 different sizes because when I was kind of trying on the regular ear, I could see that the upright ear was going to need more width, whereas the flappy ear just needed a little more length. So all I did was I knit a few extra rows of length on this ear, and on this ear I continued the increases longer than the pattern. I think I did 1 or 2 more sets than the pattern called for, as well as increase the length a bit, and then when I did the decreases, I just, did a few more decreases. And that worked really well. I'm so impressed with how well the ear stands up. I mean, I haven't done anything special to this. Oh, and then the other thing was I knit the ears on 1 size up. So I knit the body on a size 3, and then I knit the ears on a size 4, just to, get that touch. And yeah, I am so, so happy with the way she turned out. It's going to be really hard to give her up, but I know that my niece will love her. Her back paw has a little recorder of my voice with a message from my niece because she lives in Texas and I live in New York State. So we get to see each other usually twice a year, other than, FaceTiming and that. But yeah, so I think it'll be really nice. And I cannot wait to watch my niece unwrap her present on Christmas Eve. Yeah. Wonderful pattern and love the result. And I would definitely recommend this. My last finished object I've talked about before, but I wanted to show it to you now that it's blocked. And it is my Distant Shore scarf, which is out of Mountain Meadow Hannah, their heavy lace light fingering yarn, and it's 100% Targhee. It's grown and spun all very locally in Wyoming, and then they hand dye it. So this is the navy colorway. Oh, faux Thistle sheds. Anyway, and last time you saw it, I had finished the knitting, but I had not blocked it yet, and I didn't want to block it very hard. So I ended up, it grew a lot in length, and I didn't do that on purpose. I just, once it was wet, I spread my blocking mats apart and spread it out until it wasn't wrinkled anymore. And it's 7.5 feet long, I think. But it's still bouncy, so I didn't lose the bounce. And I think the reason why is that I didn't block it all for width. I blocked the points, there was a pin in each of the points. And then I just made sure it was laid out lengthwise, and I didn't put any pins in the middle to block it for width. So it's about 8 or 9 inches wide, but very long. And it turns out that this is really excellent for me to wear. I absolutely love wearing this. I've worn it quite a few times. I wear it wrapped twice when I need the warmth. And then when I unwrap it, it basically dangles all the way down to my knees, which is wonderful because that's where my trench coats dangle to. So I feel very stylish in this, and it's definitely the most successful scarf that I've knit for myself. So I've learned a lesson from this. I would have thought that 8 or 9 inches wide would have been too narrow for me because The scarves that I tend to buy retail are pashmina style, so they're gigantic. But this has worked out really well. And so there it is. As you can see, it's still nice and bouncy. I did not block it to death. And there's a lot of widthwise stretch in there that I left alone. It does curl at the edges, probably because I didn't bother blocking, but that doesn't bother me at all. And yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know what it looked like blocked. Absolutely beautiful would be the answer. And it's very soft. I think if you can wear any type of regular wool, you know, like merino or something that hasn't been superwash treated, you would be absolutely fine wearing this next to your skin. But it's not the kind of soft that feels like it's going to pill really quickly. I think it's going to stay nice and nice looking. I think it's going to put up with wear really well. Of course, I won't be able to report that until we've gone through a season, but I've worn this several times and it has quickly become one of my very favorite neckwear options that I've ever knit. So definitely more scarves like this in my future. And I wanted to give one more shout out for the yarn because currently this is the only project that has been knit in the yarn. It's one of their new lines and they're a small company. So I just really love their ethics and their commitment, and they sent me this yarn to review. And the only reason I agreed to that was because I thought what they were doing is so fabulous. So this took 2 skeins, which would have been about $30 if I had bought it. In case you're looking for another made in the US, especially lace weight, because it seems like there aren't a lot of lace weight options for domestic yarn. So I love that, and I hope to shop at Mountain Meadow Wool again in the future. Well, by again, obviously I mean for the first time with my money, but I will definitely be patronizing them in the future because I was really impressed with how it turned out. The only issue for me is that a lot of their colors are too warm for my skin tone, but we'll figure it out. So those are my finished objects. And next, I thought I would answer viewer questions. I actually have 2 this week. One is knitting related and one is not, but it's still kind of fibery. So a couple people have asked about the quilt that you can see on my bed behind me. It was made by my grandmother, my father's mother, so my paternal Grammy, and she has been a quilter for a very long time. And she originally made that quilt for her mother, my great-grandmother, in the 1980s. I think it was 87, so I would have been a year old. It's written on the quilt, that's how I know. And it was back when my father's one of 4, and my grandfather was career military until he retired at 20 years, which is when you get your military pension. And then he went on to another job. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is they didn't have a whole lot of money, so the quilt uses quite a few fabrics that were scrap fabrics, which I think is really wonderful. And so, but nowadays my Grammy is not super impressed with it, and she received it back when her mother passed away in the 1990s. And she was downsizing, and my dad was helping her downsize, and he saw the quilt and she didn't want it, and this was like last year. And my dad said, I bet Eva would like that, and so that is how the quilt came to me, and I love it. I use it every day. It's at the foot of my bed, but when I sit in my chair or whatever, if it's cooler out, I snuggle under it. The pets love it, and yeah. So that's the story of the quilt. For the knitting question, it came from Christine on Ravelry, in the Ravelry forum. And her question was, how do you decide what to knit with, you know, all of the patterns available in each category and even all of the different categories that are open? How do you ever narrow it down with your projects? And basically, do I prioritize certain things or do I just follow my heart? I'm going to mess with the lighting a little and then I will be back. I don't know if that really helped. I apologize, I don't think it did, but just in case, we'll hope it did. So that's the downside of using my kit lens. It's the afternoon, but it's a very gray, rainy afternoon, so there's not a lot of natural light coming in. And I might have to do some lens experiments as we get more into fall and winter. I'd taken all the summer sunlight for granted. Anyway, okay, so As far as what I do, I would say that I really choose what to knit next based on what's in my current knitting basket. And that is because I prefer to have 3 to 4 projects going at one time. For a while I was having 5, and that was too many. It was stressful. And I rotate between them, and I rotate between them in each knitting session. So, like, I'll do about 400 stitches on one project, and then take a little bit of a break, and then do 400 stitches on the next project. So, and the reason why I do that is because it helps my hands to switch needle sizes and to switch what I'm doing, cabling versus ribbing versus lace, and I switch hands too. So just that variety lets me knit with less pain than I would otherwise. And so because of that, I always have to have at least one project that's being knit with bigger yarn. And then, so that's always a priority. If I finish that one, like when I finished Faux Thistle, I started a worsted weight project. And I like to have at least one sweater on the go at all times. So if I finish a sweater, I will start the next one. Like when I finished this vest, I started my Phryne jumper. So those are guidelines that I have basically. And then within those guidelines, I tend to knit more projects on smaller needles. It just happens to be what I enjoy the most. And so that's why it's usually not a problem for me to force myself to knit something on smaller needles. It's the bigger needle projects that I have to prioritize. So other than that, I just try to make sure that I'm not doing the same thing with everything. So I'm not doing like 4 lace projects at once, or I'm not doing everything in the round versus flat, just because I really enjoy the variety. So that would be kind of the brain part of how I prioritize. And as far as the heart part goes, sometimes I really, really want to start a project, so I'll make sure that that's the one I start next when I've finished. Other times I really want to work with a certain color. So, yeah, I would say that for me it's a combination of both. Obviously, gift knitting definitely gets worked into that mix if I'm knitting something for a birthday or Mother's Day or something, or Christmas right now, so I always have at least one Christmas gift on the needles right now. Then that goes in. But that's why I don't consider my queue on Ravelry. My queue contains the projects that I plan to cast on for, and that I have the pattern and the yarn for. Well, sometimes not the pattern, but I have the yarn for in my stash, and I plan to cast on soon. But I don't consider the order that the queue is in as set in stone at all. It's just, if I think, okay, it's time for another fingering weight project, then I go to my queue and I see what jumps out at me, and that's when I start. Sometimes if I'm not feeling well and I'm not up for winding yarn, I'll pick a project with yarn I have that's already wound, either because it comes in a ball or I bought it from D-Stash and the other knitter had already wound it up. So that can be an aspect too, but yeah, and of course, I knit differently depending on the weather. Like, if I decide, if it's getting cold and I realize that I need another pair of mittens or something, then I would cast on for that. But, yeah. As far as how do I narrow down the patterns, for me, I listen to the yarn. And I think I've talked about this before. I tend to start with the yarn I want to use for a project and then find a pattern that works. So some yarns show off texture really well. Some yarns look better in lace. Some yarn would be too heavy for cables, but, is great in a knit purl pattern. So, yeah. I would say that swatching and not just swatching, if you don't enjoy swatching for fun, you can also just look at all the projects that have been knit out of that yarn and see how the yarn behaves in different stitch patterns and different types of knitting. So, yeah, that is how I decide what to knit next. And now I thought I would go ahead and do the yarn review. So this week I'm talking about my favorite sock yarn, as promised, which is Quince & Company Finch. It is, I looked up ahead of time, I'm prepared, 100% wool. There's no nylon, there's no silk, there's nothing like that, and it's not superwash. It's regular wool. So, And the wool is 100% made in the U.S. It's grown on U.S. sheep, it is spun in a U.S. mill, and it's dyed in the U.S. as well. Quince & Company is a small woman-run U.S. business, and it's run by Pam Allen, in case you didn't know that. She and Hannah Fettig did the Knit FM episodes, and so you can hear a lot about the behind-the-scenes working of Quince & Company on those episodes, and it's what pushed me into deciding that it was worth it to order the yarn, because a few yarn shops carry the yarn, but it's mainly in the U.S. at least. You order online from them. So, yeah. And it is $7.85 for a 50-gram skein, unless you want one of the Heathers, in which case it's 50 cents more, so $8.35. And you get 221 yards in the 50 grams, and they recommend knitting it at 7 to 9 stitches per inch. And I thought, since I have the color cards, now these are outdated. There are at least 10 new colors that I don't have the cards for yet. But since I have the color card, I thought you might enjoy seeing all of the colors it comes in. Well, except for the 10. So yeah, lots of colors. And in one of the Knit FM episodes, Pam Allen says that she never wants to discontinue a color, which I love. So let's talk about why I love this yarn so much. Oh, and I also wanted to say, as far as the cost goes, so that means usually you need 2 skeins for a pair of socks. So that's going to be about $16 for a pair of socks. And I know in Europe that is probably going to sound really expensive, because I believe your sock yarn in general is comparatively cheaper. Here in the US, like if I walk into a yarn store, the cheapest I'm going to find for a 100-gram skein is going to be $10 to $12. So that's about $4 more. And for my size shoe, if I can get a nice pair of socks out of one skein if I do contrast toes and heels, and I always have enough left over for contrast toes and heels from the 100 grams. So I can get 2 pairs of socks out of 3 skeins of quince yarn. So that works out to $12 a pair. So for me, with the ethics, and it's all things that I want to support, and I can see I'm going to have to fix the color again, the lighting again. Anyway, it's worth the extra money, especially since if I plan it right, it turns out to be pretty much the same price. So yes, so that's what I wanted to say about cost. And next I will show you all the socks. The rain has stopped, so that's why suddenly the light came back out. Okay, so I believe my first pair were these, which are just striped stockinette. They're not self-striping. They're striped, and the gray stripes are Quince & Company Kittiwake, and the white is not Quince, it's Cascade Heritage Silk. But yeah, so these have been worn regularly for at least a year. I should have looked up the dates, and you can see there's pretty much no signs of wear on them. And then the first pair of full finch socks that I did is my Owly socks. And this is out of Caspian, which is one of their natural heathers. So here's how it looks in cables. I think it looks really lovely. Come on, camera. Okay. So that's how it looks in cables, and a little bit of texture in the ribbing. And as you can see, this yarn, like the ribbing always bounces back. I don't wash my socks after every wearing. I will wear them several times before I wash them, and so these have definitely been worn at least once since their last washing, and they don't mind the ribbing at all. I tend to wear my socks quite fitted with quite a bit of negative ease. And here's the sole, and these have been worn a lot. These are one of my favorite pairs of socks. Come on. So there's the sole. And the heel, and this is not reinforced, it's just plain stockinette. I say that because I know that nowadays when I knit socks, I always enforce the bottom of the heel too. And And here's the heel flap, which is reinforced. And yeah. Oh, and there's the top of the toe. I should probably mention the way I wear socks. I grew up in a no sock household. So, not no socks, no shoes household. So I take my shoes off as soon as I come inside. So when I wear these, and I spend most of my time in my house, they're not being worn with shoes. And I have hardwood floors. I don't know if that makes a difference. And when they are being worn with shoes, I don't have a car, so I walk and I use public transport. So I would say I walk 1 to 3 miles a day on average, unless I'm sick or have a whole bunch of errands to run. But that would be a good average. So that gives you an idea of how I wear my socks. And all I can find is one little pill on this owl. And I haven't de-pilled these or anything since I knit them. And I knit them last April? Yeah, so that's about 1.5 years. There's the pill, and it just pops right off. So, I have found these socks to be incredibly durable. Or this yarn to be incredibly durable. It's a really tight spin, which I can show you because I'm currently knitting another pair. Hang on. Okay, so here's the yarn. Why did it work so well last time? No. Sorry, I forgot to zoom the camera in, so it's further than usual, and it's hard on my neck and shoulders to hold it up this close for very long. Okay, so hopefully you can see, and I'm going to try to show you how tightly that's spun. See how bouncy that is? So since it's spun nice and tightly and it's multiple plies, I have not had any problems with wear, even though it's not nylon. I think that the spin matters. And then of course it's softer yarn, like it's not super rustic and itchy, but it's not merino. So I think it's harder wearing because of that too. And here's another pair of socks. This is the Petal colorway. I apologize for the disreputable appearance. And these is the Hermione's Everyday Sock pattern, and I love how this yarn looks in textures. Why is my camera deciding that now is the time to be angsty? Okay, so as you can see, it looks so good in texture. I mean, you can see those purl bumps with absolutely no problems whatsoever. And these get a lot of wear too. This is the Petal colorway. And the other cool thing about Finch is that you can get the same colors in any of the core Quince & Company lines. So that means you can get it in a fingering weight, a sport weight, a worsted weight, and an Aran weight, and a chunky weight. So if you enjoy doing matchy things, there's a lot of potential there. And there's what the sole looks like. The contrast toes and heels are in another Quince & Company yarn, Turn, which I've talked about in a previous yarn review. And this is one of the pairs that I got this out of a single pair, or a single 50-gram skein. So you can see they're a bit shorter. I like to have both short and long socks, so that's not a problem for me. So that's how it looks in texture. I've also knit a pair of lace socks. This is the Audouin colorway, which is the other natural heather. And it's the Pointel sock pattern from Cookie A. And that's how it looks in lace. Stretch it a little because that's how it looks when it's on my foot. Beautiful. The yarn overs don't create as big a hole as you would get if you were using like a loosely spun 2-ply yarn. But for lacy socks, I actually prefer having smaller yarn overs because I think it wears better. And these are at least 1 year old. I think they're about 1 year old, so that you can judge wear. There's the sole. And, oh, this must be about, no, that's not reinforced. The heel. Come on. And the heel flap. And then there are my fox socks, which you saw fairly recently. And the contrast toes and heels in this case are the same Adouin colorway. And then this is the fox colorway and the hedgerow pattern for the ribbing. And it's a nice textured rib, because I knew that the yarn would show off that texture. So there you have it. And as you can see, super bouncy, stretchy ribbing. And these, I don't think they're fairly recent. I knit them this summer, so I'm showing you where. Seems kind of silly. Okay, so now you've seen how it behaves. Oh, and then I have a hat too. This is the Chanterelle colorway. This is the only thing I've knit other than socks, so that you can see how it looks in plain stockinette. And obviously hats are always going to wear well. The burgundy is the leftover Cascade Heritage sock that I talked about on the last episode. Yeah, so it looks beautiful in plain stockinette as well. And so I think it's really well suited to pretty much any kind of knitting you want to do. I'm not sure if you wanted something like a drapey scarf or shawl, then that's not going to work as well because it's very tightly spun. But anywhere where you need it to expand and contract frequently, and you need it to retain its bounce, anywhere you want to show off a texture like knit purl, that kind of thing. And obviously with the cables it looks great. It's going to be a heavier cabled fabric than a woolen spun cabled fabric would be, just because it's worsted spun, so there's not much air in it. So depending on what you're knitting, that could be something to take into consideration. But since Finch is a fingering weight yarn, nothing is going to be as heavy as a worsted weight yarn would be. And I also think it would look very good for Scandinavian style color work. So this is the Fair Isle tradition, which uses woolen spun yarn. It changes color frequently, it's often heathered, and you really want a soft overall effect. In Scandinavian stranded color work, it tends to be much more graphic. It tends to be fewer colors with fewer switches between the colors. And the traditional Scandinavian yarns are worsted spun, not woolen spun. So this is the only little example I have of that. But since it has such a big color range, I think that it would look really good if you need Scandinavian type color work. So I guess I think it's suited to everything. I don't know, I really love this yarn. I think it wears beautifully. And I didn't measure, but I would guess that the socks tend to be knit around 8 stitches per inch, because I always knit them on size 0s. Okay, as far as softness goes, I'm going to have to start a new segment. As far as softness goes, I find it next to the skin soft. Some of the European sock yarns I've used, like Regia and the other German brand, starts with a Z. It'll probably come to me. But some of them itch my ankles or my calves, especially where the ribbing pulls tight, those socks. I never get any itch from the Finch socks. So I would say for me there's much less of a prickle factor than for some of the more traditional sock yarns. However, I find it wears really well. As far as the Quince lineup goes, it is not as soft as Chickadee or Osprey, which are both 3-plies, and I think they come from a different mill, because whenever new colors come out, those colors are available in Finch and Lark and Puffin before they're available in Chickadee and Osprey. Wow, you can really tell that I like Quince & Company right now, can't you? We will pretend that the extent of my fangirling did not just happen. Okay, so it's not as soft as Chickadee, but I feel absolutely no prickle factor. I think that it would be really nice for sweaters as well as socks. The hat is knit up at a looser gauge than I would socks, and as you can see, there's some movement there, but it's still got a lot of memory and bounce to it. The only reason why I haven't knit a sweater out of Quince & Company Finch is just because I've got quite a few sweater quantities, and so I just haven't gotten around to it yet. It's not that I don't think it would make a good sweater yarn, and I love so many of the Quince & Company colors, so I'm sure that I will one of these days. To me, the downsides would be if you are very sensitive to wool, like if you can mainly only wear superwash merinos, then this is probably not going to be next to the Skin Soft for you. If you're looking for a Quince & Company yarn that you want next to the Skin Soft and you're very sensitive, I would direct you to Chickadee or Osprey, but I wouldn't use those for socks. And most of the colors are solid. So they do have heathers, but they're all neutrals. You saw both the natural heather colors because I've knit socks from both of them. They also have several gray heathers, these striped socks that I mentioned. These ones, this is one of the heathered grays. So you do have some heathering options, but all of the regular colors are solid, so you're not going to get the same depth that you would if you're using a hand-dyed yarn or a heathered yarn in colors, and you can kind of see that difference here. But I think that's part of what lets the texture really pop. But that could be a downside. And then the other downside for me is that I find that I need to go down about 4 stitches in a sock. Like when I knit socks with my other favorite sock yarn, which is Barocco Ultra Alpaca Fine, I'm usually in the 60 to 64 stitch range, whereas with the Quince & Company Finch, I really need to keep it around 56 if I want a snug sock. And so quite a few sock patterns, and I wear, my shoe size is 6.5 to 7 US or a 37 European. I'm not sure what that is in UK, sorry. But as I was saying, a lot of sock patterns seem to be written more for 64 stitches, so I do have to pick and choose my patterns. But those are the only 2 downsides, and it's so difficult to find a sock yarn or a fingering weight yarn that is suitable for socks that has not been superwashed that I really plan to make. I experimented a lot with different sock yarns for a while to find my favorites, but at this point I really plan to just knit future socks out of Finch and then the Ultra Alpaca Fine, which I've talked about before. I did want to talk about Care. It's not a superwash yarn. I wash my socks in the washing machine anyway. And I wash them on the wool cycle, but my machine is in my apartment building's basement and it's old, so it's a top loader and it has the agitator. It's not one of the front loaders. And the wool cycle just means that it's a short rinse and that it only uses cold water throughout. And I have not had any problems with the yarn. You've seen all of those socks have been washed in the machine. I do not put them in the dryer. I hang dry them, but I do that with my superwash socks too. Now, of course, the yarn label says hand wash. So, I mean, I don't want you to be very angry at me if you machine wash your socks and something goes terribly wrong. But I'm just saying, and I wash them in a normal load of laundry. I don't put them in a lingerie bag or anything. You could do that if you were worried about them snagging. But yeah, for me, they're machine washable. And then I just dry them. You know, I've got some plastic hangers and I fold them over the bottom part of the plastic hanger and put them on my shower rod because I live in a small space, so I don't have space to dry socks flat. Let's see, anything else? I think that's all the information that you need as far as that goes. I obviously really enjoy them. I have several sock quantities in my stash, and yeah, I really look forward to knitting with that. It's definitely one of my favorite yarns. I think it's a really great balance between not being prickly, but also not being so soft that it's going to start pilling right away. And it comes in so many colors, and it's ethically made, so that's why it's become my favorite sock yarn. Okay. On to the topic this week, which luckily shouldn't take up too much time. I wanted to talk a little bit about yarn winding. The first year that I was knitting, I only bought yarn at my local yarn store, and they wind for free when you're buying it. So this did not come up for me until I moved to New York, and I started buying all my yarn online. And so the way that if it comes in a ball, and you can just knit from the ball, that's what I do. I don't mess with those. I'm very happy when I get balls like that. But everything else I wind by hand. and I wind it by hand because I figure the reason why I knit, well, one of the reasons why I knit is because I get a lot of joy from the yarn going through my fingers and just the texture and tactile, that's the word I wanted, the tactile sensations of knitting. And so hand winding gives you those same tactile sensations, and it's something that you can do without needing to look. So it's a lot like knitting stockinette, that kind of thing, and basically it gives me more time of enjoyment with that yarn for the same cost. That's just something where I'm always trying to extend the amount of time I spend with yarn because it's more budget friendly. So I do hand wind pretty much all my yarn. Well, all the yarn that doesn't come in balls. And for plant-based fibers, I wind them in a regular ball, like the classic knitting ball, which, uh-oh, it's been buried. Here it is. So I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but just in case, this is not a plant fiber, by the way. So these are the kind of balls that I wind when I'm doing a plant fiber, because if you try to do a center pull, then it can just collapse. I'm giving in to the camera. And obviously this just pulls from the outside. And sometimes I grab a bowl, just a regular bowl, not a yarn bowl, because a regular bowl holds the ball just as well, and set that beside me on the couch if I think it's going to run away, but usually it's fine. Excuse me. I also knit from these style balls when I'm doing color work, so that would be the one exception. When I knit my flower color work tam back in, I think, May, it involved a lot of colors. And so what I did was I used that as an experiment, and I wound different hanks in different ways to see what was easiest. And when you're doing stranded color work, you want the tension to be really even, and if you're doing it in traditional Fair Isle type yarns like Jamieson and Smith or Alistar Hebridean, where they're woolen spun and they're very grabby, then I found that the center pull balls, the yarn did not come easily, and even the balls that Jamieson and Smith, I think, comes in balls instead of hanks, but I rewind those into this type ball now because I found that this style was so much easier to knit to color with because the yarn wasn't as sticky. I didn't have to yank on it with the same power. So, like color work like this with woolen spun, if I were using Quince and Company Finch for color work, I wouldn't worry about winding it into a ball like this, but that would be the only time that I do a wool ball into something like this. As I say, demonstrating a wool ball that I did for other reasons. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I mainly do is I wind center pull cakes. And here's one that is not attached to a project. So this is Quince and Company Finch in Peacock, in case you're wondering, and that's much lighter. But so yeah, as you can see, pull it from the center, and that's what it looks like on the other side, so it sits flat, and the other end is wound around right here. So I do center pull cakes because they don't run away, they sit nice, and basically you can just knit from them without thinking. And so for the first year, until last Christmas basically, I wound them over a toilet paper roll, like just the cardboard, not one with toilet paper still on it. And I did that using a tutorial that I found online, and I will link to that tutorial in the show notes. But I'm also going to do a quick video showing you how that works, just in case you're more of a video learner. So, I mean, obviously you can do this. I'm sure pretty much everyone is going to have a cardboard toilet paper roll at some point. So that's a really frugal option if you want the center pull cakes. The other option, and what I do since I received one for Christmas, is to use a Nostipinna. I'm guessing on that pronunciation, by the way. It's Nostepinne. So mine comes from Etsy because my parents are very fond of shopping on Etsy. And you use this, it has the same final effect. So don't want to gesticulate with that and smack the pets in the head. So that would be the fancier option. So you might want to try it on a toilet paper roll and see if that works for you, and then you can upgrade to a Nostepinne if you want to. I think they're fairly affordable. So that's what I actually wind around. As far as what holds my yarn, last Christmas I also received a Swift, and before that I either had to wrap my yarn around a chair or my knees, and because I have so many issues with pain, that was really hard. So often at some point I would get tired of doing that, and I would just let it sit flat in a circle and hope for the best, and then I would have a giant tangle, and it was not good. So I adore my Swift. It is probably my favorite knitting tool other than my needles. And I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's big, but I wanted to show you the color because it comes in two colors. So as I said, this was a Christmas gift, and it's the Paradise Fibers version. So it's made entirely in the US, which my parents prefer. They're the ones who got it for me. And this is the walnut color, so that's why I wanted to show you. It's a really beautiful color, in case that matters to you. And what I really like about this one is, first of all, it's very simple, so it's very unlikely to ever break because, I mean, you just use wooden pegs to attach it, and then you do the metal screw to adjust it this way. And I wanted something that I would be able to use basically for the rest of my life. I don't like having to throw things out. And what's really nice about this one is that, so it's got 4 arms that attach into a square base. And so the base can sit on any tabletop. It doesn't require a clamp. And since I do most of my knitting in my main living space, I wanted to be able to set my Swift up on my coffee table so I could hand wind from my couch. And this works perfectly for that. The base sits on the coffee table nice and sturdily. And you can have 2 different options to make it go a little bit faster or a little bit slower. I've never tried using one of the, do you know what I'm talking about? The winders, when you're not winding by hand with a center pull cake. I can't remember what they're called, but you turn the handle like this. So I don't know how it works with that, but for hand winding, I absolutely love this. And if I had a bigger, if I had more room, I would leave this out all the time because I think it's really beautiful. So as I said, it's made entirely in the US, and I've wound a lot of yarn on it, and it's just as happy as it was when I got it for Christmas last year. It comes in its own little bag too to store, and it breaks down so I can store it inside my coffee table, which is like a hope chest kind of thing. So yeah, it's quite pricey. I think it was $80. So that's why I hadn't bought one for myself, because I'm like, so much yarn you could get for $80, but it has made hand winding such a pleasure. So I'm so glad that I have one. And then I wanted to mention a few tips and tricks. So with the Nostepinne and stuff, it took me a while to adjust my hand winding methods, so I thought I would mention just what I do for cakes, and just so that you can see how they hold up. So this one I haven't knit from at all. This one I've started to knit from. As you can see, it's still happy. This one is probably a third gone. It's squishier, but it's still sturdy. And then this one is most of the way gone, but it's still, there we go, okay. But it's still not snarling. Like, I know it looks a little messy, but when you pull the yarn, it's perfectly fine. The chaos before was caused because I had pulled too much yarn. Okay, so I find that they hold up quite well. And I'm going to insert a video so that you can see what my hands are doing. But basically, when I use, actually I'm going to do the video separately, that way in case you want to refer back to it, you don't have to fast forward through the whole podcast. So that'll be a separate upload. So when I'm using the Nostepinne, So first you do an end around here and you do a half hitch. But after that, you're winding around this part. And what I do, and if you wind without doing anything differently, it'll make kind of a center pull egg instead of a cake. So I'll show you what I do differently to make it a cake. But I do start with an egg, and I try to do it about that much. And then I switch to winding so that it makes a little cake. And then once there's a pretty, about maybe that much height on the cake, I start winding as an egg again, and I make it longer. And once it's quite long, as you can see, then I start doing the cake method again, and that's what I do for the rest of it. And I found that for me, that means that, because you know how sometimes when you do a center pull ball, when you start knitting from it, you have to really yank on the yarn to get it out. So the method that I've been using lately, you don't really have to yank at the beginning because there's already some empty space there. And it also really helps for them not collapsing too early. If I make a cake too squat, if I make it much shorter than this, then they seem to start collapsing more quickly. Like if I do it that size so it's short and wider, it doesn't seem to behave as well. But you'll be able to see an actual demonstration of my hands doing that in the separate video. But I just thought I would share. And my neck and shoulders don't always allow me to hand wind. So that is definitely a downside, and I recognize that some people probably won't be able to hand wind at all if you have certain issues with mobility. But that's just my experience with it. Final segment for this week is Knits in the Wild. And so, in case you're a new viewer, I try to take photographs of myself wearing hand knits and share them with you so that you can see how I style them. I do this on Instagram, not daily, but very regularly, if you follow me there. And I was starting to feel self-conscious about it. I was starting to worry that it came off as a little bit narcissistic. And I really hope that it doesn't, because obviously if you're demonstrating how you're wearing a hat, you're going to be doing a selfie. And so hopefully you guys know that it's of the hat, it's not of my face. And honestly, most of the selfies that I take on my walks, my hair is like half wet, because after I shower, I take Thistle on a walk and I don't blow dry my hair, so I'm not going to make her wait for another hour while my hair air dries. So I'm rarely looking my best in the photos. But yeah, so hopefully it doesn't come off as narcissistic. I've gotten so much positive feedback about it, so I definitely want to continue that segment. And I had run out of batteries for my regular camera. I've got a remote shutter for so that I can stand in front of it and take the photos. And my batteries had stopped working in that remote. And so that's why I haven't been taking many kind of post photos, but I got my rechargeable batteries in today, and so I should be able to pose more for future photos. Anyway, so I'm going to include both the photos I took of just the jacket plus hat plus whatever on the wall where I have my little coat hook, and I'm also going to include the Instagram collages that show how it actually looked on me. But first up, I have an outfit photo that I took for my first herbarium vest wearing. As you can see, today I went more casual. I'm wearing it with a t-shirt. But for its first wearing, I wore it with a blush silk blouse to pick up kind of the pinks in the vest, a taupe tweed wool skirt, and then my knee highs, which are knit out of a hand-painted yarn. Can't remember the company, but so it's like almost a very dark blue-gray, almost black, but then it's got flecks of rainbows in it. Anyway, so it matches the silky color of the ribbing on the vest quite well. If you're wondering why I have the awkward pose going on, it's because I was not wearing underpinnings, and since the vest has so much negative ease, that was very clear. So I was trying to preserve a little bit of modesty on the internet, hence the awkward arm crossing. I took my finished object photos of the vest wearing the undergarments, and so you can see the full vest in all its glory on the project page if you're curious. But of course, you've been looking at it as I've been talking to you. I am rambling. I apologize. Okay, the next outfit, I wore my Prelude to Charm cloche, which I will be talking about next week because I felted it to size. It was a little bit big for me. And then I wore my Little Boy Blue scarflet and matching mittens. So basically I went with a shades of blue ensemble for that day, and I paired it with a vintage gray wool jacket. Then I wore my green Sir Gawain's shield beret, which I knit for a Gawain and the Green Knight themed knit along last year. And the Hare in the Moon mittens that I knit with the leftovers so they match. And it was cold that day, so I actually needed those mittens with my gray trench coat because it was rainy. Next up is my Music of the Spheres beret, which is another Alice Starmore Hebridean 2-ply finished object. You can't see them, but I wore my gray fingerless mitts, a retail raspberry colored pashmina type scarf, and then with a navy blue velvet blazer. And finally, one that I only took photos of on Instagram, but I wore my taupe leg warmers, and these fall down if I try to wear them over bare legs, but when I wear them over tights, they stay up just fine, so they're still useful. With my burgundy leaf matching hat and mitts, because that picked up the colors in my vintage wool plaid skirt. And I wore a wool scarf I got off eBay in similar colors, and then my tan trench coat. So that's how I've been wearing some of my hand knits lately. Hopefully you enjoyed that and don't think I'm a narcissist. Because, you know, I talk to my camera every week for an hour and put it on the internet. That's really helping my claim to not be a narcissist, isn't it? Anyway, I had a great time chatting with you as always, and hopefully I will see you next week when I will be talking about all of my works in progress in a project snapshot. And here we all are wishing you goodbye. Moth really doesn't like being picked up, but Thistle's always a good sport. I hope to see you again, and that you had a wonderful October and are looking forward to November. Bye!